Good morning. My name is Sterling Higa, Chairperson of the Authority. I'd now like to call to order the June 4th, 2025 Kakaako Authority meeting of the Hawaii Community Development Authority. The time is now 9:37 a.m.
Thank you, Chair. In accordance with section 92-3.7 revised statutes, the Hawaii Community Development Authority is holding today's Kakaako board meeting virtually on Zoom. The Zoom link details were included on the meeting agenda. Therefore, members of the public are welcome to join us on Zoom and also at our physical meeting site at the American Brewery Building, 547 Queen Street, second floor boardroom. The HCDA communications staff is hosting this meeting. Once this meeting begins, everyone will be muted for clearer audio. Board members, if you have any comments or questions, please unmute yourselves to speak. It is important that all individuals clearly state their name, pseudonym, or other identifier name each time prior to speaking. If you wish to provide oral testimony and you are attending virtually, please indicate so by clicking the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen. If you are attending in person, you'll be called to the front of the room, the order that you signed up. All testimony will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Your testimony must be related to an item on the agenda. Before you begin your testimony, we ask that you identify yourself and spell your name for the record. When 1 minute is remaining, 1 minute remains will be called out. And when 30 seconds is remaining, 30 seconds remaining will be called out. When time has elapsed, time will be called out, after which you have 30 seconds to conclude your testimony. And then your audio will be turned off. If you are attending in person, the presiding officer will call the next testifier. Keep in mind that this is an opportunity to share your thoughts with us. If you ask questions during your testimony, neither the board nor the staff is required to provide an answer. If the authority's connection for the remote meeting is lost, the meeting will be recessed until the connection is restored. If the connection cannot be restored within 30 minutes, the meeting will be terminated and the authority will continue the meeting at another notice date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. HCDA board members, please remain visible and audible during the meeting. Also, please acknowledge you are present by either saying here or present. Let the record reflect that the following members are present. Vice Chair Ishii. Here. Thank you. Secretary Lidstone.
Here.
Thank you. Member Miranda Johnson.
Yeah.
Thank you. Member Anderson. Is excused. Member Evans.
Here.
Thank you. Member Streitz. Here. Thank you. Member China.
Here.
Thank you. Member Sakota.
Here, we have quorum.
Perfect. For today's meeting, board members will have an opportunity to ask questions or provide comments after an agenda item has been presented. Individuals from the public who have requested to provide verbal public testimony on a specific agenda item are on standby and will be permitted to provide their testimony respectively. Moving now to agenda item number 2, approval of minutes. These are the regular meeting minutes of May 7th, 2025. Board members, are there any comments or corrections to these minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as presented. Agenda item number 3 is decision making. To consider authorizing the executive director to 1, expend funds from the agency's reserved housing subaccount for the purpose of the agency using such funds to buy back reserved housing units in the Ulana Ward Village located at 828 Awahi Street, Honolulu, Hawaii 96813, and further described by Oahu Tax Map Key number 2-1-2-1-053001, Ulana, when the agency's buyback right arises during the regulated term of the reserved housing units. 2, explore only other means of financing for the purpose of the agency using such funds to buy back reserved housing units in Ulana when the agency's buyback right arises during the regulated term of the reserved housing units. And 3, explore only various pre- and post-buyback options for the Ulana units that arise for buyback, including but not limited to accepting equity sharing, buying back and selling, buying back and renting, and or rent-to-own programs. And just as a note, the authority may convene an executive session pursuant to HRS 92-5A-A4 to consult with the board's attorney on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. Mr. Craig Nakamoto, Executive Director, will now present the staff report. Director Nakamoto.
Thank you, Chair and board members. The staff report for this action item is contained in tab 2 of your packets. And the reason why it's being brought up at this point is the pendency of Ulana's units closing in December of this year. There are close to 697 reserve housing units in Ulana. With the number of reserve housing units in that project, which is only reserve housing units. The concern arises if, you know, a few of those units or more of those units end up being sold, and then the agency has the right to buy back those units. And this action item is not really to kind of discuss the merits or demerits of equity sharing or buyback. I think that's a topic for another meeting, and maybe even, you know, the creation of a pig. What this action item is really try to address a practical concern that could arise, you know, after December 2025, and having a plan for the agency to address possible buyback of units. In the past, as you might recall, you know, there was some media coverage about the agency not being able to buy back units or not buying back units. Once the agency rejects the one-time right to buy back the unit ends up being the owner can then sell it at market. Of course, we get the shared equity, but it ends up sort of being an open a market unit. And I think part of the board's stated goals is to not only to create affordable units, but I think it should be to preserve as much as possible affordable units or reserve units. So this strategy or this plan will give the agency really the authority to expend money out of our reserve housing sub-account. And if you recall on the financials, there's about $11.5 million in our reserve housing sub-account. So the authority is only to give me the right to authority to spend money out of that $11.5 million reserve housing sub-account. And if there's other means of financing like DERF, to use that money to buy back units. At the next month's meeting, we'll come back to the board to discuss and other means of financing like DERF, get the board's approval to use DERF funds, and have a little more clarity and details on the plan, whether it's going to be just buy and sell, buy and rent, or some other kinds of programs. I will say that the agency is gonna take a look at these units as they come up for buyback. Even if we have the funds to buy back all units, we may not buy back all units. I think, want to be selective in the units that we end up buying back. But I think, you know, this gives us a plan, and this gives the board assurances that there is a plan to deal with these units. And so we'll come back next meeting and discuss how we intend to kind of implement program and whether we're going to use alternative means of financing besides reserve housing money. And I will say that even if we end up using all of the 11.5 in the reserve housing sub-account, there's approximately $100 million in shared equity in Ulana alone. So once that shared equity comes back to us, it's going to sort of replenish the reserve housing sub-account. And that shared equity is not just limited to the regulated term. It goes, the right to get shared equity goes beyond the regulated term. So it's going to replenish. It's going to replenish over time with the shared equity from Ulana. So I'm open for questions from the board. And then with the idea that we'll come back in June with a little more details on other means of financing and how we're going to approach these buyback units. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, board member.
Thank you, Director. Members, comments or questions? Member Evans.
Craig, I know that the core action says that there are regulated terms of 2, 5, and 10 years for these units. Can you give me a little bit more of a picture of which units are 2, 5, and 10, and how that was arranged?
Yeah, so the 2, 5, and 10-year regulated term, is based on the price and affordability. So so. And we think that a lot of the units with regulated terms of 2 years probably won't come back to us, for buyback. Just because, if you intend to sell 2 years, you can wait it out and then you don't have to come back with the buyback. I think some of the 5 and 10-year regulated term units will come back to us for purchase, for potential buyback.
And just to clarify, the lower the price, the longer the term typically.
That does raise another question.
Mhm.
So studios, which may have more turnover, simply because you can't just form a family or a household in a studio very easily. With those, based on price, then they have a 10-year buyback, as opposed to a 2-year?
Possibly, yes. And for those studios, Member Evans, and this is why I think, I mentioned that. Even if we have the money to buy back all of the units that are offered to us, we would be very selective in what we end up, buying back. I think the preference for the units that we buy back is to buy it and then sell it as a reserve unit for the remaining, amount of regulated term. That's our preference. If we can't, I think, we've been looking at various financial scenarios on, what it would look like if we rented a unit. And particularly on a studio, we might be hesitant to buy it back as well. I mean, just because of the reason you stated that, it's not appealing to a person who is planning to grow a family or, to increase his family size household. So, yeah, there's all those considerations.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other comments or questions?
Sure.
Yes, please, Member Strike.
Okay, so I understand this has a significant number of affordable units, but I was wondering if there's a little more context why, we're considering this targeted approach just to Ulana. Are there versus a more general kind of strategy for buybacks and so forth?
Well, I think it's part of it, Member Straits, I think, is the sheer numbers in Ulana. There's quite a bit of units, it's almost 700 units. But I also think that as if we have other, projects that we may consider using the same kind of approach for other reserve housing units that come up for buyback. There's also been a lot of back and forth, Member Strikes, between the developer and some potential buyers. The buyers have a binding contract with the developers to buy the unit. They have to meet certain milestones, like qualify with the lender and then be ready to close. So what we've noticed with being involved in the communications, mostly Lindsay, but being involved in the communications is there seems to be a lot of, not a lot, but there seems to be some concern among buyers of the state of the economy, whether the economy is going to get into kind of a recessionary mode, whether people will have jobs. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's causing, I think, a lot of uncertainty whether people want to close. Now, people are a lot of them are going to close on the units. There's some units that may have alternative buyers come in, but because of that going on, Member Strikes, I think it's made me kind of more concerned about the project and coming up with this plan.
Okay, so I guess if the actions to address those issues are the same for other units, should we just be giving you a more broad type of authority versus just tailored to Ulana to give you more flexibility if there's other situations that come up in the other projects?
My thought, member strikes is that, while we could use the same approach for other projects that come up. I prefer that it be tailored to Ulana for now, and then if we need to get this other, another approval for another project, I think we'll come to the board with that. I'd rather kind of keep this to Ulana, and it's gonna depend too on, how much we have in our reserve housing subaccount at the time, what our ability is to buy back, so it's a little more tailored than general, although we use the same principles.
Okay, and then just last question, I wasn't sure if I caught, but if the authority buys back a unit, resells it, and you dictate new restriction terms, so you could reset the restriction period if you wanted.
Yeah, so I think that's something we're gonna have to do a little more consulting on with our Deputy Attorney General, but my read of it is that when we buy back a unit, the units are gonna be subject to the 2005 vested rules. So if we buy back a unit that has a 10-year regulated term, whether we sell it or rent it, we're gonna have to follow the 2005 vested rules. That's my read of it. So I don't think we can buy back a unit and say we're gonna then take a 10-year regulated term and have it only regulated for 2 years. I think we take the unit with the existing 2005, reserve housing rules attached to them. And I think it's okay, member strikes, because we've looked at different scenarios for, if we have to rent it, for a little bit of time. We've looked at different scenarios and we're prepared to rent it. Now, it's not the preferred, way of, handling these units, but if we have to, we have to.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, member strikes.
Members, any other comments or questions? Member Sakota, do you still have? Your hand was up earlier.
Yeah, Craig, you kind of touched on my issues. Is that I was wondering whether most of the units are actually going to close because rates are higher. I think there's the fear of immediate special assessments to cover increasing insurance costs on our buildings.
Yeah.
So I compliment you on having the foresight to see that, because I sense that it's coming as well. So
yeah, I don't have so the kind of privity to with the developer to know how many are going to close, how many might not. But my sense of it is that there's some that are hesitating to close, but they've been working with the developer and looks like they're going to close. There's some instances where there's what we call these kind of life instances or situations where, one obvious life instance is if you have the death of the buyer or a death in one of the family members or the household, then they're making some accommodations for that. My guess is, member Sakota, is that they are going to close, but I'm just still worried, even after they close, that with the uncertainty in the economy, sort of the anxiousness that I sort of feel, that we need to come up with this plan to address that, quickly.
great, thank you, Craig.
Thank you, member Sakota.
Members, any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move now to public testimony. Is there any persons pre-signed up to testify? Any persons wishing to provide testimony? Just a final comment. Thank you, Director Nakamoto and the authority for taking proactive action on this. I think Vice Chair Shi is nodding because the board in the past we've seen units come and we've seen units go and not be bought back. The board, asked the authority to take some action. The authority authorized HHOC to do some of those buybacks. But this kind of action, making sure that we have substantial financial resources available to provide for the buybacks is, I think, a great model for the authority. So we'll move now to motion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by, let me make sure I get the motion right. I want the text of the motion. Is there a motion for the board to authorize the executive director to, one, expend funds from the agency's reserved housing subaccount funds for the purpose of the agency using such funds to buy back reserved housing units in the Ulana Ward Village located at 828 Oahu Street, Honolulu, Hawaii 96813, and further described by Oahu tax map key number 2-1-0530001 Ulana, when the agency's buyback right arises during the regulated term of the reserved housing units provided. However, the limit the agency may expend on buying back Ulana units is the amount in the agency's reserved housing subaccount, plus funds derived from other means of financing such as DERF. 2, explore only other means of financing for the purpose of the agency using such funds to buy back reserved housing units in Ulana when the agency's buyback right arises during the regulated term of the reserved housing units. And 3, explore only various pre and post buyback options for the Ulana units that arise for buyback, including but not limited to accepting equity sharing, buying back and selling, buying back and renting, and or rent to own programs. Do I hear such a motion?
So moved.
Moved by member Evans. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chair Ishii. Members, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll ask Craig to take the roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. On the motion made by member Evans and seconded by Vice Chair Ishii, member Evans,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ishii,
Yes.
Chair Higa,
Yes.
Secretary Lidstone,
Aye.
member Miranda Johnson,
Yes.
member Strites,
Aye.
member Chino,
Aye.
member Sakota.
Yes.
Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Director Nakamoto. Thank you, Board. Moving now to agenda item number 4. This is the report of the Executive Director, the monthly report and other status report, including approved permit applications that did not require HRS 206E-5.6 public hearings. Executive Director Nakamoto will now provide his monthly report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just summarize some of the highlights in the report contained in tab 3. The large dog park continues to be closed till June 9th, to kind of rehabilitate the grass, make repairs to the irrigation system, and to repair things that really have been, I think, vandalized from the time it opened. After we reopen the large dog park, we'll close the small dog park for maintenance. And then we may consider just periodic shorter closures to allow the grass to rehabilitate from time to time. This Thursday evening, we do have a meeting with stakeholders on the progress of the Ilani Y Street improvements. We'll share where we are with the project and the next steps for that. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director. Members, any comments or questions? Member Evans.
Chair, I'd like to ask Craig, I note in the item number 2 in your report under asset land property management under reserved housing, that there's was an option to do subordination of the equity sharing payment agreement to allow a reserved housing unit owner to obtain a second mortgage. I noticed that wasn't an option in the Ulana one. Was it an option? It just, it falls under one of those general categories of exploring.
We thank you for bringing it up, member Evans. I think we can, we can look at it, but I think that one is that subordination is very specific to
That
just
particular,
to do refinancing, but we can look at that as part of one of the options.
so the previous motion with those three different options for buyback, exploration of
Yeah.
other options is broad enough that that could include this?
I think so. I
Okay.
think so.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Evans. Members, any other comments or questions for Director Nakamoto? Seeing none, we'll go to public testimony. Do we have any persons pre-signed up to testify? Any persons wishing to testify? Seeing none, board members, any final comments or questions? All right, we'll move now to adjourn the meeting. Thank you to those who joined us on Zoom or in person. This concludes our business for today. The meeting is adjourned. The time is now 10:03 a.m. Thank you, members.
Thank you, board.
Thank you.